Watch right now on the Front News Project the fatal launch of the Yars. A nuclear disaster for Russia is just around the corner. Putin has launched the summer offensive. Is the Kremlin's cannon fodder really going to march on Kiev again? And also a new modification of the Magura naval drone. The Kremlin is already saying goodbye to Crimea. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch it right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom continues. Greetings! This is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko here with you. For the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then, let's get started. And we're starting right away with exclusive material. On the night before Monday, Russia threatened to launch an RS-24 Yars missile, supposedly under the guise of exercises. And in terms of destructive power, this very Yars could even rival Putin's little nut, which he constantly boasts about in public. In other words, the infamous nuclear blackmail from the bunker dweller continues. So why didn't the Russians go through with the launch? And also exclusively, who commands such maneuvers in the enemy's lair? And why? Could the launch of the Yars have been fatal for terrorist Russia itself? More on this coming up.
Russia was unable to carry out the launch of the Yars intercontinental missile. There are far more of these Yars missiles in Russia's arsenal than the infamous Putin's little nuts.
Yars. Well, let's put it this way. It's produced in mass serial production. Oreshnik, on the other hand, is an absolutely unique experimental model.
Despite Russia's plans to conduct a training and combat launch of the RS-24, Yars intercontinental missile, on the night of May 19th, there were no signs of an actual launch, according to the military publication Defense Express. This is not the first time that Russia has made threats but failed to launch the Yars. In 2023, the missiles failed to launch twice.
Clearly, the Russians are bluffing with the Yars. The idea that for technical reasons they couldn't launch a missile that's on combat duty is just unrealistic. Simply unrealistic.
The day before, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine announced that on the night of May 19th, the Russians were planning to conduct a training and combat launch of the RS-24, Yars intercontinental ballistic missile. The purpose of such a launch is demonstrative pressure and intimidation of Ukraine and its European partners.
Initially, they did everything to intimidate the Ukrainian people. That is, they are, bluffing. This is purely an informational and psychological operation. To this, I would like to respond as follows. I am addressing the regiment commander, the division commander, the army commander, Golovko Karakayev. Have you lost your minds? Have you not read your own Rocket Forces combat regulations at all? Do you even know what they are for? Or do you just want to ride around on scooters? After all, we know where the commander of the Nizhny Tagil division lives. That apartment hasn't changed for decades, because it's equipped with special communication devices. We know a lot of things.
By flexing its ballistic muscles, the Russian Federation is making large enterprises legitimate military targets for Ukraine, and striking them could cause a complete collapse for the residents of a given region.
You have the city of Salavat in Bashkiria. You know what kind of production is located there. One drone has already arrived there, paving the way. What, do you want half of Bashkiria or all of Bashkiria to be poisoned? By Heptil. That's what you'll get.
And this is not the only blunder Putin has made ahead of negotiations with the American president, Donald Trump. The Security Service of Ukraine reports that it has destroyed the Russian Neva radar, and warehouses on gas production platforms in the Black Sea using surface and aerial drones. It was a lively night in Jankoy today. According to local telegram channels, there was a strike on the airfield there. Another embarrassment for Russia is the boasting about the supposed capture of the village of Vilnopol in the Zaporizhzhia region. In the video that the Russians are bragging about, you can see an occupier waving the tricolor for a few seconds, after which he immediately retreats from the open area. However, our defenders added to this story and published a follow-up, showing how they eliminate the Russians from Ukrainian soil.
But now, let's analyze the current situation on the blazing Pokrovsk front line. The situation here is, as usual, extremely tense. In the Pokrovsk direction, since the beginning of the day, Russian invaders have made 26 attempts to push Ukrainian defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Mirolyubovka, Yelisavetovka, Aiche, Alesovka, Udaknoye, Novosergievka, Troitskoye, Kotliarovka, Andreyevka, and the side of the settlements of Zaraya, Nova Ukrainka, Staronikolaevka, Shevchenko Pervaya, Novaya Poltavka. The defense forces are holding back the enemy's onslaught. 20 attacks have already been repelled, and 6 more battles are still ongoing. Meanwhile, the entire lineup of the formidable Magura naval drones, so threatening to the enemy, was finally presented in all its glory to the public at the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Among them is the newest Magura V7, which, as practice has already shown, is capable of shooting down Russian Sukhoi jets right from the sea. We have prepared a special report, Rotov, for you about these unique developments by Ukrainian weapons engineers. Let's watch.
Just a few days ago, they actually caused quite a bit of a stir. And now, a week later, the main intelligence directorate has revealed what they have actually been using to destroy Russians at sea for several months. The miracle weapon turned out to be the upgraded Magura V7 naval drone. It is currently equipped as follows.
As of now, 21 enemy targets have been destroyed. And that is a world record. This is the first time that 16 ships have demonstrated the capabilities of the aggressor country. Though now, they rest on the bottom of the Black Sea. 3 helicopters and recently 2 enemy fighter jets as well. The cost of just those 2 fighter jets is over $100 million.
At the same time, by unveiling the new drone, Ukraine's GUR has slightly lifted the veil on its capabilities. In 2 years of using naval drones, this has already become the 7th modification. It has increased payload capacity, speed and maneuverability, as well as improved stability on the water, which allows the Magura V7 to deploy its full range of weaponry even in sea conditions with waves up to both 3 points.
The Magura V7 is an entirely new version. Here we can see additional equipment. This equipment can be installed or left off as needed. It can be equipped with R-73 missiles of Soviet manufacture, which are shown here. It can also carry AIM-9 missiles. Turrets can also be installed. A radar can be installed as well. In other words, this is a multifunctional platform. You can upgrade it as much as your imagination allows. At the same time, it retains its primary function. And here is the warhead, which creates a hole about 1 to 1.5 meters wide in a ship.
The development of the new platform also focused on greater autonomy. The unmanned Magura V7 boat is capable of operating for at least 48 hours or up to 7 days if powered by a generator.
A completely different technological level of warfare and tactical use of the capabilities we have was demonstrated.
Thanks to the increased operating time, the range that the Magura can travel has almost doubled. And now officially, the drone can carry out missions anywhere in the Black Sea with a range of up to 1,500 kilometers.
The crews of Russian aircraft flying over the Black Sea, who now realize they no longer have any sense of security, yes, even if they don't see our weapons in their targeting radars, that doesn't mean those weapons aren't there. And it was precisely these weapons, these types of armaments, that targeted their aircraft.
Of course, the most high-profile operation to date involving the new Magura V7 drone remains the destruction of 2 Russian Su-30SM attack aircraft in the Black Sea. The head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirilo Budanov, revealed in an interview with the War Zone that 3 unmanned boats took part in the attack firing at the aircraft. At the same time, one of the Sukrus was killed while the other managed to eject.
It turned out that the Russians have neither detection systems nor proper means of engagement. In other words, the only way they can attack is to fly up with a machine gun and fire from it, or rather, from the aircraft cannon. They have nothing else.
At the same time, this operation will almost certainly make it into military textbooks. After all, this was the first time in history that a naval drone managed to shoot down a modern military attack aircraft.
What makes it unique? Well, truly, it's the fact that this is a remotely controlled surface system. Specifically, it's remote controlled. This is very important, which shot down a manned target. If we talk about the cost price of the Magura, which is about $250,000 to $300,000, and the cost price of the Russian Su-30, which is $40 to $50 million, then you can calculate how many times cheaper the means of destruction was compared to the expensive target.
But analysts point out the issue here isn't even about the money, although the Kremlin repeatedly has problems with that as well. The main issue is the technology and production capacity, which in Russia have either been lost or are in severe shortage due to Western sanctions.
Every Su-30SM aircraft is worth its weight in gold. Component supply is hard to get by, bypassing sanctions. Moreover, Su-30SMs are not produced, or only in very limited numbers.
It is worth noting that the new capabilities of the Magura V7 have completely changed the concept of warfare in the Black Sea. After all, if earlier drones mainly posed a threat to the Russian fleet, today it is no longer even safe to fly over the waters, and accordingly, it is impossible to control the situation.
Every time the Ukrainians launch an operation in the Black Sea, Russia faces a very difficult choice. What are they willing to lose? Oil and gas platforms, or for example some other installations in the Black Sea, or say their assets on the territory of Crimea? Because these unmanned boats can also carry drones. In other words, they're like mini aircraft carriers. Or maybe they'll have to lose another helicopter or a Su-30SM.
By the way, having seen the effectiveness of the 7th Magura model, the GUR has promised to ramp up their production, and they still have a whole sea of targets left.
Now let's move to the Huliaipol and Orikhiv sectors of the front, as well as the Dnipro region. The enemy army's bloody rampage continues here as well. In the Huliaipol sector, the enemy carried out airstrikes on the settlements of Huliaipol and Malinivka. In the Orikhiv sector, the occupiers launched 4 attacks towards Malatokmachka and near Stepne. Stepnohirsk was also subjected to airstrikes. In the Dnipro region, enemy units attempted to advance once. They were unsuccessful in doing so. Additionally, the enemy launched a fierce attack on the village of Bilenke in the Zaporizhzhia region. Homes of peaceful Ukrainians and non-residential buildings have been destroyed. This village is located less than 20 kilometers from the occupied territories. There is not a single military facility there, so the occupiers use drones and artillery to hunt civilians. Since the beginning of spring, 5 local residents have already been injured. TSN correspondent Kira Oves will tell and show what life is like near the enemy.
Irises are blooming abundantly around the houses. Livestock graze nearby. People are working in their gardens and fields. And just 18 kilometers away, over there beyond the dried-up Kakhovka reservoir, are the occupied towns and villages, including Vasilivka, Enerhodar, and Dnipro-Rudne.
The entire area we can see is all occupied territory. Ahead of us is the last village, Krasnodneprovka. There are still residents living there at the moment.
How many people are still there? Do you know?
About 100 people remain there.
You can't stay on this stretch of road for long. So, together with Vadim Pshenichny, the community police officer, we head back to Bilenke.
The enemy is over there, but as you can see, we are all here. We keep working.
The village is under heavy artillery fire every day, says the police officer. Just a few weeks ago, 6 shells landed on Volodymir's property alone. The debris went through fences and garages. There are craters among the young potato plants.
Look, you see this Grad rocket pierced right through these slabs. These are concrete slabs after all. I couldn't have imagined something like this even in a bad dream. We used to think that our parents had lived through the worst, but it turns out that today we are experiencing something even more incomprehensible.
Volodymyr says that everything on this plot is set up for living and working, but the Russians destroy years of hard work in just a few seconds. In addition to artillery, they also use attack drones.
There have never been any soldiers here. There's nothing here at all. It's all clear here. There are chickens, ducks, and here are the greenhouses. You can see from the drones that there's nothing military here. I've handed over so many drones to Vadim. Plus, he even managed to make an emergency landing with a whole Orlan worth $50,000.
Since the beginning of spring, 5 people have been injured in Belenki alone. Among the wounded is 78-year-old Svetlana. The woman says they were simply walking to the store with her son when they were attacked by a Russian FPV drone. On the way to the store,
we were just approaching the store. He said, "Mom, there's a drone behind us." We didn't even have time to look back before it fell behind the car. And that was it. It exploded. My legs immediately started burning.
A community police officer immediately took Svetlana to the hospital, but there are still plastic fragments from the drone in her leg.
They couldn't be removed. They said they couldn't cut into my leg because of that. So what am I supposed to do? They strike often. I think it was yesterday at 5 or maybe 4 in the morning, and there was another strike then too.
Despite the constant explosions and danger, more than 5,000 people live in Belenka.
Almost no one at all really ever leaves Belenka. Moreover, we have 1,600 people here who are internally displaced, and most of them are from the occupied territories of Zaporizhzhia region.
There are also about 1,000 children remaining in the village. No mandatory evacuation has been declared here. However, law enforcement and social services are urging families with minors to move to safer places.
Well then, let's analyze the situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, since the beginning of the current day, there have been 4 clashes near Chasiv Yar, Bila Hora, and Kurdyumivka. 1 clash is still ongoing. On the Toretsk front, the enemy tried to break through our defenses in the areas of Toretsk, Novospassky, and towards Ilinka. So far, the defense forces have repelled 2 enemy assaults. 3 more clashes are ongoing. The Russian army has launched its summer offensive, and there is no hope for a ceasefire, stated the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Command. So what is happening on the front lines at this very moment? In which directions is Putin's army trying to focus its main efforts? And what is the main goal of the enemy's new criminal states offensive? Our journalists have been looking into these questions.
If you want peace, prepare for war or a large-scale offensive by the occupiers under the guise of negotiations.
Everyone saw the delegates they sent to the negotiations in Istanbul. They were just some nobodies, and in my opinion, it's not worth taking this seriously. We all want peace, and no one wants peace more than the Ukrainian military. In fact, the enemy's summer offensive has already begun, and I wouldn't count on a ceasefire happening anytime soon.
While in Turkey, the occupiers' diplomats are doing their utmost to pretend they want to negotiate.
The delegation arrived in Istanbul today on the president's orders to hold direct bilateral talks with Ukraine without any preconditions.
Meanwhile, on the front in Ukraine, the occupying forces have launched active assault operations in several directions at once.
It gives the impression that ahead of the negotiations, the Russians have decided to throw all their infantry and motorized infantry reserves onto the battlefield. Oh, and prepare yourselves mentally for a war that will last at least all summer and September, one that will be very intense and at times unpredictable. Sorry, but it's already clear that this was planned and they only need the negotiations as a smokescreen. They don't want anything except a well-prepared offensive.
The Russian Federation will not stop, will not look back at the start or the possible start of a negotiation track or the extension of the negotiation track in Istanbul, however you want to phrase it. They will continue to pursue the military objectives set before them.
An intensification of assault operations is being observed simultaneously in all directions.
We have begun our own offensive actions.
They have already begun their offensive actions. They started in all directions, and the main direction was precisely Sumy. 7,000 troops were concentrated there.
The occupiers have increased pressure in the Koris Pokrovsk direction, and on both flanks Boakurs of the Pokrovsk front.
At the same time, despite the increased activity of the occupying army, experts and military personnel note that the so-called Russian summer offensive came as no surprise, since the aggressors' creeping advance and pressure have been ongoing for at least the past year.
So once again, the Russians are preparing for an offensive in the summer, preparing their resources, and so on. But right now, there is no offensive. And in winter, and in autumn, that's why I don't really believe in any kind of offensive. To be more precise, it has been ongoing since the end of 2023 anyway.
Regarding the upcoming summer offensive, I can't speak to its reality. The offensive hasn't stopped for a single day. Ukraine's territorial losses in April amounted to about 150 square kilometers. Compared to that, these 150 square kilometers were given up to the Russians at the cost of personnel losses. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, that's about 45,000.
Putin's team rejects concrete steps toward a ceasefire, such as a 30-day truce. But the Kremlin's real intentions are demonstrated by military equipment, aircraft, bombs, missiles, and shaheds. And by the hundreds of thousands of armed occupiers concentrated along the entire front. But Ukraine is ready.
And now let's move to the Kharkiv or Lyman direction of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. In the Kharkiv direction, the enemy attacked the positions of our units near Vovchansk and Kutkivka twice. One of the clashes is still ongoing. In the Lyman direction, over the course of the day, the invading army carried out 13 attacks on the positions of Ukrainian soldiers near Yanpolivka, Zelena Dolina, Torske, and towards Hlushchenkove, Karpivka, Serebryanka, Yampol, Hrihorivka, Red Kodub, and Olhivka. 3 clashes are still ongoing. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is boasting about new deadly features of its Shahed drones. Allegedly, Russian engineers have equipped the drones with protection against electronic warfare and increased their warhead. Is this true, or just another myth from Russian propaganda? And in turn, how can Ukraine respond? Believe me, there is something to respond with. Our journalists know all the details.
Faster, more powerful, and more resistant to electronic warfare. The Russians have claimed that they have improved the capabilities of their Shahed drones, and now it will be harder for Ukrainian air defense to deal with them. In particular, propaganda media report that Russian engineers continue to enhance the features of their long-range drones and have recently achieved certain successes. This includes a new engine, a new warhead, and a new navigation system.
During this time, the Shaheds have undergone, well, if we count very accurately, about 8 or 10 modifications or upgrades. This is related to improvements in the transmission system, improvements in the communication system, and the addition of inertial, well, not inertial, or rather, yes, inertial systems, because initially they flew purely on GPS, then inertial systems were added, and now it seems there are even Shaheds that can fly using visual. Well, that is by map-based guidance.
The Russians also claim that they have supposedly upgraded the microelectronics, although it's more likely a matter of some new Chinese microchips. These are supposedly going to help bypass the electronic warfare systems used by the Ukrainian armed forces. And the updated anti-spoofing algorithm has even been called the best in the world by Russia.
There is information here that was some occurs with the help of Starlink. It has 2 communication channels, one for transmitting information and another for control. And essentially, a Shahed-type drone has now basically become like an FPV drone, which is operated by an operator. So they are developing very actively in this direction.
At the same time, the Ukrainian side often cannot even assess the new characteristics of the Shahed because they try to destroy these deadly drones before they even take off.
At one time, we destroyed several locations where Shaheds were stored. And this happened on the mainland part of the so-called Russian Federation, using the forces and means of the naval forces. There was even a case when this happened together with the instructors who were supposed to train the Russian personnel there.
But let's get back to the updates. It is reported that the drone's warhead itself has also been modified. Its weight has reportedly increased from 50 to 90 kilograms, which is why the updated Shahed, however, has lost half of its range and can now fly a maximum of 650 kilometers.
There's nothing new here. They just adapted the warhead for the Shahed. So this isn't something new, right? The fact that they're starting to... By the way, the first use was about half a year ago. Our Institute of Forensic Expertise identified and found this, isolated this warhead.
At the same time, the Russians are also changing the type of warhead. The original Iranian version for striking fortified areas has long been written off by Russia. After all, drones are used against civilians and to cause maximum destruction to residential buildings, something else is needed.
The function of the munition itself has also changed. That is, the standard high explosive fragmentation munition has started to be replaced, including with incendiary explosive or purely high explosive types. And the second important component, we are already seeing isolated cases of such drones being used to drop unknown explosive devices.
As for the engine modification, it is now allegedly said to have improved the drone's flight performance. It is claimed that the UAV is capable of reaching an altitude of 3 kilometers and flying at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. The new Shahed can also dive sharply at its target from this altitude at speeds of up to 400 kilometers per hour, which should significantly complicate the work of our mobile fire teams and electronic warfare systems. At the same time, the use of long-range drones has also changed. Apparently, despite the bold statements, the production of the Shahed is still far from the targets announced by the Kremlin. That's why strike drones are now being launched, mixed together with decoys.
It varies, depending on the situation, but more than a third of them are Jarans, which pretend to be or act like Shaheds. In reality, they aren't actually Shaheds at all. We really should have stopped using that term a long time ago. At best, we should use the term like Shahed, because there's nothing left of the original Iranian Shahed in them.
The Ukrainian side has not yet officially responded to information about the new Shaheds, but they have responded with action. Despite the claim that every drone should now be able to reach its target without any issues, just recently the defense forces repelled an unprecedented drone attack. Out of the 273 drones launched, 88 were shot down, and another 128 were suppressed by electronic warfare systems. In other words, the effectiveness of our air defense was over 95%.
That's all for today. But very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.